Okay, as the lady said, the recording is in progress now, and we are here for our next community call and Ask Me Anything session. This week we're going to talk about the Ethereum attestation. Uh, what attestation service was it?
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm curious about that, and I want to see the connection between the BrightID and that. And I'm gonna give the stage to Jorrin to lead us because I think among us, Jorrin and Philip would be the guys who know about this the most. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. We're gonna go through them after we start an introduction and then start our conversation. Use the chat, ask questions, and we're gonna go through them as well. Thank you. So, Jorrin, please.
Hello, everybody. So yeah, I recently heard about Ethereum attestation service through ECC. They had a presentation, kind of unveiling what the project is all about. And currently, they're still in test nets, but they plan on moving to mainnet by the end of the year. And when I was listening to the presentation, a lot of things sounded similar to what BrightID kind of is able to do, but also provides a different use case. So I've also posted there's two links in the chat. There's a link to the slide deck that they used, as well as a link to the YouTube video to the presentation. You guys are welcome to take those in later on. But to give you like a kind of brief overview of what they're proposing is that they suggest that current identity protocols work in a somewhat top-down approach with a one-size-fits-all kind of mandate, and they've tried to build from the bottom-up approach and create a protocol layer where anybody can come and create an attestation schema, and that can be like literally anything. It could be like, your eyes are blue, or you're a certain height, or whatever, and then you can attach that to your address, and that acts as a credential, and then you can actually attest to attestations, whether or not that attestation is true or not. And there's like this level of recursion that can happen. And one of the examples that they gave was a reputation system, where somebody that is highly trusted in the space can attest to the reputation of somebody they know and say on a scale, how well they trust this person, and that can create this sort of web of trust, and that kind of can be the basis of certain other things, right? We're trying to solve this problem of on-chain identity and trustworthiness, which I think BrightID has a part to play, but isn't exactly an identity solution, but is an anti-Sybil solution. So I'm just interested in how these kind of ideas intersect and how they might benefit from one another, and how BrightID might evolve in the light of this kind of new paradigm shift. Yeah, I think starting there is a good kind of overview. Is there any questions about that? Was it clear what the attestation service is about?
So, as a user, am I gonna go through an identity solution first and then get into this process?
So it could go either way, right? So one of the other examples that they give is it could be a KYC thing, where some trusted body is attesting to the information that you need for know your customer, your name, maybe your address, some sort of government kind of identifier, that sort of thing. And then they can attest and say, yes, this address is this person. And then what that can be used in the crypto space is up to the crypto space, right? And so there's this aspect of trust that I think is something that BrightID tried to solve with, seed groups, where there is seeded trust, and we know that these folks are, trusted more so than, an average person that we've never met. And then we will look to their attestations with higher rating, right? We will trust people that they trust more because that's where the trust kind of started, right? And so that's one area that I'm still trying to kind of wrap my head around, is like, how do we bring that trust from the real world into the digital world? And like I said the example earlier, like if Vitalik, trusts Adam really well, then some of the trust that the entire ecosystem has in Vitalik would then transfer a little bit to Adam. And then if Adam then trusts Paslar, so a little bit of that trust would then extend. And that kind of web that gets created is how we can kind of analyze and suss out where this trust comes from. But aside from like celebrities, I guess, and that sort of thing, like how do we bring trust into the space? Like, would there be would the government of the US government or whatever have a private key or a wallet, a public key that is known, and say, I trust this person because X, Y, or Z, they've gotten a driver's license, they have a social security number or what have you. And would that be the way it works? It could very well be. And does BrightID, like, how does BrightID kind of fit into that? Can we import some of the attestations into BrightID to make the connections, the social graph that we've created, more robust? Can we start to attest using this service to say this person is BrightID verified, as well as other things that would then come together to create somebody's identity? Because right now BrightID is just saying we have a higher degree of certainty that this person is a unique individual and only has one account, right? We're not saying who they are or any other attributes about them. But if we kind of use the attestation service, we might be able to link other parts, and it becomes self-sovereign in this system. Attestations are pausable, revocable, movable. They're customizable, so you can give them certain traits, and they can be tied to a single address or tied to separate addresses. So it's very flexible in that regard, and they're making very little kind of opinions about how it can be used. In a similar way to BrightID is like, here's the graph with a bunch of data. How it gets used is kind of up to the apps that implement it. So I see that as a similarity as well. So yeah, I think that's kind of the basis of what I've been thinking about once I heard about this, and I'm just curious what you guys' thoughts are on how these things can interact. I see Victor's got his hand up already.
Yes, thank you, Jorrin. So this kind of system of trust will be working both ways. I mean, could be the untrust too. I mean, if I am a really trust person, can I say that maybe this one is untrusty? So you could do that too.
Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah, I wouldn't call myself an expert on this. I'm just kind of learning about it as well.
Okay.
But from what I understand, it's an open protocol where anybody can create an attestation schema, and that is like, this address has these attributes, and then they can make that attestation, and then so whatever consumes that is up to the ecosystem. So I guess network effects kind of play a part here. If there's only like, I create an attestation schema and then only I use it to say, I'm the coolest person, then it doesn't really have much value, right? But if I create that schema and everybody else says I am the coolest person, then it might have more value. So yeah, it's a very social kind of, I guess, democratic way, but I'm not sure like how easy that would be then to manipulate. Like there still needs to be a level of being able to identify a person's uniqueness, because then you could just Sybil attack the system and create a bunch of accounts that attest to the same thing and give a false sense of that credential, right?
I was thinking about that when you mentioned the celebrities. Do you know that in internet there is too much hate in networks like Twitter or something like that. So there is a lot of people that just for being there or for being themselves, they get a lot of hate from a lot of people. So it would be you are really identified in the network. So there is a lot of people that just to make damage to you are going to flag you like untrusty. So will be a little bit unfair because they are doing just to get on you. So that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, great point. Yeah, I think that yeah, I haven't fully reckoned with how this can be used, much less how it can be misused. But I'm just trying to figure it out as we go. I'd say I'll pass. I had something to say there.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, in the context of BrightID, I understand trust. When we say we trust someone, we mean that this person has only one account only. Future attributions would be, okay, I trust that this person is not going to even try creating a duplicate for himself. So it's all based on uniqueness. I trust the uniqueness of this account. But when you're talking about the Ethereum attestation service, and we are talking about people making attestations that I trust this person. Uh, I'm still not clear on what you mean by trust. Trust what? What kind of behavior is something that I'm attesting to?
I have something to say about that. So getting back to what Victor said, Victor asked, he asked, well, you know, what about celebrities? And I see the most valuable attestations and like what I see the trust being is from like known entities that that anyone can sort of check themselves. So if you look at the forum posts that I wrote about importing trust, it's the same sort of thing. It's like there, you know, there's trust that's out there, and that trust that's out there is like, you know, it's the reason that you know that Gitcoin.co is like Gitcoin's actual website and not just like some fake website some people made up to look like Gitcoin or something. So there's like this trust is just kind of out there. So we don't have to necessarily like create a new system to figure out how to like catalog that trust or something. But that says that the attestations from a verifiable entity where the verification process already exists for that entity, and you don't have to like create something new to prove it. Those are going to be the ones that are the most valuable. Like someone, I think Jorrin also mentioned governments. And so those are the types of things that like the traditional sources of trust that are going to be useful right away. And what does that mean for BrightID? Because BrightID is importing, or sorry, BrightID is dealing with like, do you trust someone that they're not that you know that they're not creating Sybils? Like, what does it mean when you vouch for someone in BrightID? Actually, when you look at the Aura project, which nobody knows about yet, but there's a project that we're working on for BrightID that that goes deeper, because like when you make an attestation in BrightID itself, you're just saying, like, it's very basic right now. It's saying, I just met this person. I think this person is suspicious. I already know this person. It's quite easy questions that you can answer about someone that you find yourself face to face with. So that's, and that works well, but it's limited in what you can attest. And so Aura tries to go beyond that and allow power users to give much richer information about the person that they're face to face with. Like, do I think that this person is going to behave honestly within the BrightID system? Like, do I think this person is going to be an active user, a good connector? Do I think that this person is going to be careful with the connections that they make, or do I think that they might be kind of sloppy and careless? And so those types of things that are useful to attest about someone on a very personal level. But I don't think I mean, I don't know, like maybe the Ethereum attestation service is like that free form that it can support stuff like that. But I kind of see that, that's useful in the context of BrightID, but even outside the context of BrightID, there's all sorts of attestations that are useful for other things as well. And I think when you import trust from one of those well-known sources of trust into the graph, it doesn't immediately get you verified. I think people in the past have been too quick to jump to something like, oh, look, the US government says that you're okay. Let's just give you a giant stamp and now you can use everything and that's your passport. Like your online KYC, but we know that there's a lot of weaknesses in trying to have some central agency providing some online KYC, and we want the sources of trust to be many and varied, and to just sort of give you a little trust boost that you can then spread out to your area of the graph. So you don't throw away the graph analysis. The key to detecting Sybils is still to look at the social graph and look at those interconnections between people. But can you pull in a little bit of pre-seeded trust from one of these attestations? And I think so, definitely. And that's one thing I like about BrightID is how flexible it is and how open it is, because it can pull in attestations from any source. So it could read the Ethereum attestation service and start pulling, BrightID nodes could start consuming that. BrightID nodes can consume connection data. Right now, all the connection data they consume is from ID chain, and it was made through the BrightID reference app. But that's it's just as easy for BrightID nodes to say, okay, we're gonna oh, look, here's another rich source of cryptographically signed connections coming from this other blockchain through this other app. So we're gonna consume those as well. And that's totally fine. That's BrightID nodes should do that. And so I love that there's this kind of just wide open attestation service that's saying anyone can use this. So BrightID nodes can smartly look at that and say, oh, look, there's some really interesting stuff here that I want to use to seed some trust into the graph. I'm going to pull these. I think especially this kind of attestation is the one I really like. I'm going to pull those into my graph and use that data. And so I love that there's stuff like this. I think it's a problem that there's not enough of this stuff. There aren't enough cryptographically signed attestations out there. And so I love that this is happening and there's going to be more of those. Can BrightID nodes give back to the system? Sure. I think one of the things I really like about BrightID is you can, when you get a verification signed by a BrightID node, you can get it back in a bunch of different formats. You can get it back in a format that works really well for Ethereum. You can get it back in kind of the de facto signed, cryptographically signed a method that BrightID prefers, which is the ED-DSA signatures. You can get it back in other ways too, like any useful way that we find. BrightID node should be able to return that. So you should be able to ask your BrightID node and say, hey, I'm verified, right? Give me back a verification that I can just plug into the Ethereum attestation service, and it should be able to do that. So yeah, I think that nodes will give back, nodes will consume, and we need more stuff like this. So I think it's really good.
Yeah, I love all that you just said. I see Shahin has something to say. I wanted to add quickly to what you said though before we ask Shahin what he has, Adam. And so this is where I feel like the idea of how they say like you can it's a recursive system where you can have attestations on attestations. I think BrightID, I've been thinking about how that can be recursive as well. So I imagine BrightID being the source of truth to create an attestation in Ethereum attestation service and say this address is BrightID verified, right? And then BrightID nodes consuming that as that information as well and see what other attestations does this address have. It is already BrightID verified, so that's like say level 1 or level 0 even, and then they have XYZ other attestations, which could then feed into a higher level of verification or higher qualification of uniqueness, right? Because that's really what we care about in BrightID, and security as layers of defense, right? There's no just like one stop all security measure, but like the more attestations that an address has, theoretically, the higher level of uniqueness we could attest to them or attribute to them, provided that those attestations are verified themselves, right? So like going back to the example of if I'm the only person attesting to I'm the coolest person, then it's not really worth much. But if we can use the attestation service to see like, oh, a lot of people are saying the same thing, then that might add to the level of uniqueness, the surety that we have of somebody being unique. So these recursive like feedback loops that I think are very interesting to kind of investigate.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I also think that that when it comes to verifying uniqueness, I think that the calculation of that will happen on BrightID nodes. So I don't think that there's going to be like a recursive attestation existing on the EAS that's going to like add up to being verified for as unique. I think BrightID nodes have to use like they still have to do graph analysis, and they still have to do complex algorithms that are going to be beyond the scope of the EAS. But there are other things that like these recursive or like combinable attestations that are going to be useful. Like you might say, well, you need to have like this reputation score from this place, plus you need to have BrightID uniqueness level 3 before you can get this thing that you want. So
exactly,
there's definitely ways to combine them that are really interesting. So
exactly, yeah,
it's cool that they do it that way.
Shahin, what did you got?
Hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. Yeah. I just wanted to say something about that uniquism making connection with other people. Nowadays, I see there are a lot of people, they are making duplicate accounts, and they're making like one person making plenty of accounts, and they try to fake us with their like change their places, change their name, like they're asking like a child in front of the camera, and just when I ask her why you want to get verified in BrightID, and that they said they teach her like say Gitcoin, then we don't ask further. And like there are more like they are asking for like much older women. She even don't know about like Gitcoin and what is cryptocurrency is, and like this kind of situation have been we are facing. And do you think like for this situation we could do something, or we could handle this situation? Like I saw a woman, she every time join Chinese BrightID connection meeting, and she every time try to fake us, but most of time I catch her. And like, is there any way to pretend her to not doing this kind of things? And she I bet she will come tomorrow too.
Yeah, it's we always find it interesting that there's people, even if they get repeatedly like reported and shut down, that they just keep coming back. And I mean that's interesting. So some things that we talked about in the we have the unique human workshop that we're doing. There's about 30 of us in there. It's a really interesting workshop, and in there, some of the things that have come up are that if you have something that is open to like a big group of people that are unique, but most of them don't know what it is or don't care about it, and then there's a smaller set of people who do know and care what it is. So I'm thinking about Gitcoin right now. Let's say that there's 100,000 BrightID users and only 10,000 of them care about Gitcoin. And the others might be approached, like you gave the example of a family. So I could go out and maybe get some neighbors and some friends, and I could even tell them, I could say, hey, Gitcoin cares about unique humans. You guys don't care about Gitcoin. I care about Gitcoin. Can I sign you all up? And just so that like I can have some more votes. Don't worry, I'll do all the work for you. And so it's like, at what point is it? It's kind of this gray area, because at what point is this person being autonomous, and at what point are they just being like a slave of this other person? And at what point do they feel like, no, I'm helping my friend. Like my friend told me what Gitcoin is about, and I'm helping them. Like, sure, they're doing the vote for me, but I know what it is. I said they could do it, and I said that they could that I would donate. But or it being, like it's actually the person just needs another account so they can split up their money and get better matching for their project. So it really is this gray area. Like if you tried to go and investigate, you might find out it's really hard to be able to catch the person and say, aha, this is really your money and not your friend's money. Like, how do you know? That's really hard to figure that out. So there are always going to be these really interesting gray areas. And I think we need to, as applications that are using uniqueness verification, we need to figure out how to measure the engagement of our users, and to the point where like we offer the best stuff that we can offer to the people who like have shown the minimum interest that we want. And so I think like right now Gitcoin is probably setting the bar a little too low, and definitely BrightID is setting the bar too low. So if you combine those, then you end up with people with multiple accounts. And even if we can catch them because they're not trying to like disguise their face or whatever, or go someplace else where nobody knows them and get verified there, they can still use their friends. So it's like, yeah, so we got to do a better job in the Gitcoin area, but we also have to do a better job in the BrightID area. What we can do for BrightID is offer better verification levels that have to do with like stronger attestations, to use a word that keeps coming up today. Like instead of just saying like, okay, like the only type of connection you need for this verification is just met. So just go and like into a room of people that you don't even know, and you'll get this verification level. Like that's, you know, that has some value, but there are much better verification levels that you can get if you require if you require a better attestation, if you require more history between the people vouching for each other, things like that. So we need to, I think what we found before is users like to have a very clear set of steps. Like I do step 1 through 5 and I get verified. So we need to find a way to still have a set of steps. They'll be harder. You'll have to do more work, but still have a clear set of steps. So almost everyone can go through this process and have success if they follow the steps. So that's kind of where we're at now. We are working on something called Family Vouch, which is really interesting. Basically says like, to make this connection with someone, you have to be able to vouch for them, and you have to know about their immediate family. Like you have to be able to like know who's in their family. And so you have to know this person pretty well to be able to make this type of vouch for them. And we think that a social graph based around that type of vouching is going to be much more reliable, set a much higher bar than this just met vouching that we have right now.
Yeah, I completely agree, Adam, and I think that's what I was thinking about when I was saying like it's a recursive kind of feedback loop where we can rely on some of the apps that already use BrightID, like in our community, and use the information that they're getting to feed back into the system that creates a higher level of I hate using that terminology, higher level of verification or something, but like more surety of uniqueness, right? More surety that you are an individual person. So for example, Rabbit Hole has a bunch of different campaigns, and they have an experience point system, and they are tracking on-chain actions, right? So if they, for example, used attestation service and said like, this user is BrightID verified, which is a requirement in order to do the quests to begin with, but then they've completed, quest A, C, and D, and attest to that on-chain, then we can consume that and say, okay, this bumps up the surety that we know this person's unique, as opposed to someone who just has a just met verification level. And then it becomes more information for that app again to use, or any other app to use, to say, okay, this person is BrightID verified, and they have such and such a standing in Rabbit Hole, and maybe they use the Ether, and they've contributed in these discussions, and it adds more surety that this person is engaged in the community and has taken some actions outside of just showing up to a Zoom call and getting verified and then using apps, right? So it's again an open protocol. And the more we can create richness in the data that we provide, the better the apps can use that data to provide the service in a more secure, Sybil-resistant way.
Yeah, I really like that Rabbit Hole example you gave. And I want to say that I think that that's going to be a really valuable substitute for this kind of stopgap that we have now, which is like you don't know anyone, show up to a connection party, because right now that's where the seed people hang out. But what if you could be your own seed person? What if Rabbit Hole says, okay, you've gone through these steps, we'll attest to that. Rabbit Hole has some trust in the overall BrightID ecosystem. They have some trust seeded to them. They have the ability to add trust in the eyes of BrightID nodes. So if a BrightID node is analyzing the graph, it says, oh, look, Rabbit Hole trusted this person. They said that they've been a good user for the last 3 months in Rabbit Hole. They've been, and so they gave them this like stamp of approval from Rabbit Hole. So now instead of like people having to go to and find seeds at a connection party to like get verified. Now you've got like another point in the graph. This person, this valued rabbit hole user is now like a mini seed, if you will. They've gotten some trust. And if they go out and behave well in a bunch of other environments, maybe they get even more. So you can basically become your own seed. Now your friends and family, you know, can connect to you. You have, instead of going to a connection party. So, you know, there's a much better likelihood that I will know several people in my circle of friends that have a little bit of trust that they've gotten from other places. And so their little bits of trust flow into me. And when you look at the overall graph, you see like, okay, here's this big region on the graph that's got like all these little dots of trust seeded in. And that's exactly what we're looking for. And that's how you just differentiate between the Sybil region, where there's like, you know, maybe only one dot in the middle, which is like the attacker adding his trust, and he can't get that sort of stuff for his Sybils.
Yeah, I got that. Hey, Victor, you can speak. It's okay.
Okay, I want to talk about 2 points there. One, what said Adam, we got that like that kind of situation with the BrightID stars, because we got a lot of power right now. We can do verification. So we are a point of focuses of all the system. So I got that personally, that problem, because all my life, my friends are really like all the video games, the system, the internet, but they doesn't be a lot in blockchain. But right now, all the world is talking about Axis. All my family, all my friends want to sell Axis, to sell their cars, their houses to buy Axis. I don't know, everyone is crazy. But the thing is that there is getting in the blockchain about for that. So I said that, guys, I am doing this kind of thing for my life in BrightID project. I said, oh, that's really cool. We want to be there. So I got this like philosophical problem that I said, I have the power, but I cannot give you that right now. You need to come to the meeting that in this time, because I don't want to feel that I'm doing something bad, because I want to do it in the time that I have to do it. So maybe some of them are still waiting for the time because they don't have the moment. So if you give that power to that level to someone, like you said in rabbit hole, you said that someone have this kind of performance in the networks, in the blockchain in general. So you give them that verification level of that amount of trust, like we were talking about. So that's it's a responsibility that you're charging to that person, and maybe you don't want to have the responsibility. So there is some kind of thing, because if you do something bad, you can just destroy all the people that are around you. So there is something that shouldn't be discussed in that way.
Yeah.
So that's my point of view in that kind of matter.
Yeah, I think in an ideal kind of system, like right now we have, like, if we imagine like the scale of like we don't trust you or we do trust you, right? Right now, if you connect to a BrightID star, you get a huge honking weight on the trust you side, and bang, you're automatically verified, right? But I think in the system that Adam was saying, and I was kind of suggesting, where the trust given to people to distribute themselves becomes more granular. So in connecting to a person who has a higher level of uniqueness quotient, it adds a grain of sand to the trust you thing, and you need more of those in order to weigh it, right? So it's not just like you connect to this person who did X number of rabbit hole quests and now all of a sudden you're verified and you never have to come to a thing. It's additive, right? And so we take that huge honking weight and we chop it up into smaller pieces, and you need more of them in order to gain that trust level. And then again, it's always on the apps that use BrightID as a verification system to decide where they draw the line. Like, you need this to use our app. And if you go beyond that, then maybe there's another tier, and it could be like a tiered system. Like in order to unlock a certain quest on Rabbit Hole, maybe you need a higher level than we currently provide. Right now we just have one kind of level. It's a binary, either you're verified or you're not. And I think in the future we want to make it more granular, more scalar. And yeah, I think that's what I want to say. And then there was one question in the chat here.
Yeah,
but I think one person could create multiple Rabbit Hole accounts.
yeah. I want to answer that question for Selvus, because I think so. Rabbit Hole uses BrightID because of this problem where if you learn all the material that you need to pass the test, then you can just go. So maybe it takes you 2 hours to learn all the material, and then so you're going to pass the test. But once you do that once, you can go back and start over with a new account, and you don't have to spend the 2 hours, and you can just keep passing the test over and over and get way more than your fair share of the reward. And so that's why Rabbit Hole uses BrightID. But if they were going to have like a good behavior certificate that someone could import into BrightID to gain trust in the BrightID system, it would have to be something that did a better job than just like that sort of Rabbit Hole certification, because otherwise it's just like this circular thing that doesn't really work. But if there's something that you can do in Rabbit Hole that proves, it doesn't even have to be like a test. It can just be like a proof of, like a human proof of work, basically, or a proof of like that you were there, proof of engagement, proof of like being part of the community, or proof of like spending time there, those sorts of things, like proof of like being an active member, which goes beyond just like this like rote filling out a form, but actually probably resembles more of like engaging with other people in some way. Those are the types of things that you want to be able to import back in, because those are the things that are hard to duplicate, because like if you, and like Jorrin was saying, it doesn't like automatically give you, make you verified. It's just a little bit of trust, and then you get it from a bunch of different places, and then that is again like spread out to other people. So you also need people giving trust into you, and you give trust to them through the social graph. But like if you can show that you've spent like a fair amount of time engaging here with this community, and you've spent a fair amount of time engaging with this community, like all those little things start to add up. And that's what we're looking for, not just like something that you can fill out in 5 minutes.
Also, in the case of Rabbit Hole, there's financial costs involved. Like you got to pay transaction fees in order to complete these tasks. And yeah, each account needs to be BrightID verified. So it is at least some barrier of entry, right? And the more we can add to that barrier to increase our belief that you're a unique person, then the better the network becomes in general. Robert's asking, is there any anonymity, or will the data be public? So I'm not 100% sure on this, but I do believe they mentioned something about using ZK technology, which is still being built out. But in the end of the day, in the very least, you're using your Ethereum address. So I mean, there's pseudonymity there. Whether or not you like the data itself is obscured, I think that can be like incorporated into it. And then you can give somebody permission to read this attestation by providing your key or signing a message to say they can view this information for a particular period of time, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that might be out of the scope of what I understand about this, and it's still in its young phases. So I imagine.
I think in general, just that's nice about attestations is the attestation doesn't need to give out a whole lot of information. It's like, has someone done KYC on you? So somewhere someone has all of your information, but all they put on your account was a stamp that said, yes, this organization has done KYC. So we're saying it's good, or like The example is, if you go to the bar and you want to drink, you need to prove you're over 21. The attestation is simply, yes, you're over 21. It's not your birth date. So even without using any ZK systems, we can protect a lot of user data simply by making it a binary attestation instead of one that gives the detail that got to the answer. It's just like, it's the resulting answer, not how you got there.
Yeah. Another example they gave was voting. If you wanted to, you could use an attestation to say, I attest that, this candidate should be the president, and you can obscure your address because you want to know the vote is cast, but you don't want it to necessarily be tied to you as a person. So they say you can use ZK proofs in order to do that. So I imagine you can do that with multiple things.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely becomes a lot more useful once you can have, once you can start using zero knowledge proofs. And Ethereum does have the capability, like I work with ClearFund and we use Macy, which has the ability to compile proofs and make them available on the Ethereum blockchain. So Ethereum already has the capability to use zero knowledge proofs and to verify those proofs on chain. So because it's so valuable when it comes to attestations, I would assume that like this is going to be a pretty high priority to be able to support that. And certainly you want to be able to do things like take an attestation and maybe like share a piece of it, and not the whole thing, or share it in a way that like the person you share it with can't just turn around and share it with somebody else as if it was themselves or something like that. So you can gain all those things using zero knowledge proof. So I think it's just a matter of time before we'll have that.
Cool.
I can feel like we are getting closer to the hour.
Yeah, we're right on.
And yeah, now I realize how noob was my question early on. That like what kind of attestations? There are like million kinds of attestations that
Exactly.
you could make.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so thank you, Jorrin, for leading us and teaching us something new. I think we all learned something new, and we can like, yeah, it's on the testnet as you said, and now we can wait and take part in there. I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot in common with Aura idea, and I can't wait for that call that we start talking about Aura in details, and we all learn about Aura. And then there, I think there's gonna be lots of light bulbs that, oh, this is the same thing, and this is, oh, okay. And yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and especially Jorrin and Adam for talking about this. I'm gonna stop recording now, and we can start a group connection together.